Good morning, ladies. How are you today? Welcome to our first annual interactive workshop. Thank you for taking the time out to be a part of this workshop. My name is Simone Asker, and I am the coordinator for the nursery and kindergarten department. This workshop serves as to educate you about the developmentally appropriate practices with the intention to bring about changes in the classroom. So firstly on my agenda, I'm going to give you a description of the standard. Developmentally appropriate practices was founded by the NAEYC in the year 1986. It is a set of guidelines toward the curriculum content and practices for children from birth to 8 years old. It is the characteristics, knowledge, and training of teachers and how they use this in the classroom to help children develop in an appropriate environment suitable for their age group. So for this workshop, my main focus is on Standard 3, which is interactions and relationship with children from 3 to 5 years old. So during my weekly routine visits to these classrooms, I have observed the need to focus on Standard 3, which speaks about interactions and relationships with children 3 to 5 years old. I have seen a lack of interactions between teachers and students, and I found it necessary to highlight these issues as it affects the children. So the developmental practices, we have two types. We have inappropriate practices and we have best practices for those inappropriate practices in the classroom. So for the inappropriate practices, today, one of the main ones that I see that we need to pay keen attention to, which based on my observation, I think really need to be fixed. This issue needs to be fixed immediately. No? So too often we see this in the classroom where teachers have a preference to a particular gender, or they ignore religious beliefs, cultural practices, etc. And I know some of you teachers are guilty of such acts. This means, say for instance, a child coming to your classroom, you might find a preference with that child because of the child's skin color, maybe their hair type, maybe their family background. And in the classroom, that is deemed as an inappropriate practice. So for the best practice for this, as early childhood practitioners, we should not have favorism towards one child. We should treat all children equally, don't matter what their background is, what religion they have. We should have no reason to judge a child based on a child's background. Take for instance, maybe a particular parent come into your classroom or into your school, you're not fond of that particular parent, and so that child end up in the long run to suffer for that because maybe you have a disagreement with that child parent, so you start to take it out on the child by showing favoritism to somebody else but showing less attention to that child. And in the classroom, things like that is deemed inappropriate. So it is important as an early childhood educator to not have favoritism but treat all children equally. So the next inappropriate practice that I'm going to touch on is the dominance of early childhood practitioners' work displayed rather than the children's efforts. Meaning, like having all the teachers' work being displayed in the classroom or the charts and not actually having the work that the children had put in and done themselves hang around the classroom so they can actually see what they have done and other parents can see what their children have done. So the best practice for this is to promote more artwork in the classroom and displaying the children's work at their level, meaning not having the children work be displayed where they're not able to see or touch. So this would be a more appropriate way to display the children's work in the classroom. So my next inappropriate practices is, and this is a very important one, early childhood practitioners sit with their backs to the children and are aware of what is taking place in the classroom. They are unable to respond to a child's need or when dangerous situations present themselves. Early childhood practitioners leave the children on their own for extended periods of time. Remember, ladies, we are dealing with children. The second you take your eyes off those children, you don't know what could happen. So it is utmost important to not leave your children unattended. And too often I've seen this. When you leave your children unattended, a lot of things can happen within that time. There could be accidents, they could seriously hurt themselves, and we as early childhood practitioners will be in some serious trouble. So for this, the best practice is to position yourselves in the classroom so you are able to see every single child and are able to monitor their every move. Respond to every children's needs immediately or as soon as possible, whether indoor or outdoor. So ladies, the next inappropriate practice we're going to speak about is where early child practitioners make abrupt rules for children and rely on only a few guidance strategies, such as raising their voice and using a disciplinary approach. These strategies do not allow children to develop in an inner sense of managing and regulating their own behavior. Emotional abuse and neglect is seen as well as physical punishment such as slapping, pinching, shaking a child, pushing, putting the child in an unusual position. So this is basically saying that you're physically abusing the child, which in any classroom is deemed inappropriate. The unusual positions, meaning like how you punish a child, may tell them to stand with their face facing the wall, maybe holding one foot, hold a ear, something. That is what we are speaking about when we speak about unusual positions. I know some of you are guilty of this. When a child, what we deem to be misbehaving, we'll tell them, go into the naughty corner, or we find some kind of punishment for them. And all of that is deemed as an unusual position as well. So the best practice for this is to model a positive reinforcement, praise the children, no form of physical abuse, no form of emotional abuse, and no form of neglect. Okay, so for this one, I know we too often do this one, where a child might start to cry, and we will shout to them, stop the crying, nothing happened to you, nothing wrong with you. Yes, this is deemed as an inappropriate practice in the classroom. Go. Children's feelings are not taken into consideration, and no opportunities are given to these children to freely express themselves. So as early childhood practitioners, the best practice for this is you have to love your job, and in order to love your job, you have to love the children, show them emotional support, try to listen to them as much as possible, acknowledge their emotions, and try to comfort them whenever is needed. So as we know, children develop physically, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, and emotionally. Did I say that? Yes, I did. So we need to support the whole child. So some of the activities that I suggest that we do in the classroom is, as a teacher, we try to support the children by scaffolding them in whatever we do in the classroom. We can have activities that will support our children emotionally, where they can express their feelings, express their thoughts about things. We can also do activities that we can have a sense of community. So we need to provide a comfortable, stimulating, and loving environment where children can be themselves, express themselves, and be comfortable and be stimulated, which is appropriate for their particular age group. Thank you. So ladies, I've come to the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, let me see your hands and I'll answer those questions for you.